Hi, I would like to direct your attention to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv. You know what this is. You've heard about it from me before right here, but I think it's important to keep talking about it. That is a way for all of you listeners to support this network and this show. So if you like what we do and you think it's worth a couple of bucks a month, that is the way that you can make a big difference for us. Once again, that is patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv. Thank you. Welcome to Radio Free Midworld, a podcast about the Dark Tower series of books by Stephen King and, related works. We're here today to talk about Salem's Lot, and I am joined by Autumn Greer. Hey, Autumn.
Hey, how are you doing today, Cole?
I'm doing just fine. I just finished reading this book today, and I couldn't be more excited to talk about this remarkable book that, so this is Stephen King's second book, and I'm noticing all kinds of things that were like firsts for him here,
It's like going back and seeing how a serial killer, made those first few furtive attempts at making his kills, like he was working on his ritual.
Yeah, on the neighborhood squirrels, Yeah. See, I had to be very tactical there. Neighborhood squirrels, nobody could get too sad about squirrels. Somebody's going to get sad about squirrels. Thank you so much for hopping on. You are very kind to kind of pick these episodes about the major books here.
Yeah, anytime I can do more reading, I'm first to sign up for those. I'm like, I have to read 700 pages to do, an hour and a half recording. I'm going to sign up for that one.
It is appreciated. But you had read this before, right?
What's funny is I had actually I did finish the book. I read this book when I was probably 11 or 12, and I hated it. I think I was at an age where I was just coming off of all the Anne Rice books. I think the Vampire Diaries books had come out at the same time. We were still way before Twilight. But
right.
I liked my vampires to be cute and broody and romantic, and the vampire in this is extremely gross. He's not cute at all. He doesn't have a cute top. He doesn't have sleepy bedroom eyes. Well, I mean, I guess he has sleepy murder bedroom eyes.
Right, right. Bedroom eyes in the sense that they're very dark and sunken like chips of coal in his face. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, bedroom eyes.
I think I even gave the book away. I was like, I don't want this dumb book anymore. I've got all my good Stephen King books, and I'm never going to read this again. So I reapproached it. Gosh, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and I was like, well, I don't have anything to do. I'm at an airport. I'm stuck. I'll just try rereading this, and I loved it.
Yeah. Had you read Bram Stoker's Dracula in the meantime between those two?
I absolutely had, and I think that also is part of what made a difference, because this book does such a good job of, I guess, carrying that forward. What is it? Dracula hits the road.
Yep.
It does just the right amount of callbacks and homage while being a completely unique story. I'm crazy about it.
Yeah. And it definitely is a different kind of story than the romantic vampire stuff you were talking about before.
Yeah, nobody's cute.
Yeah. Well, it's hilarious because I've definitely fallen for the lol Twilight whatever, was a very popular thing, and you have to have an opinion about a very popular thing, but no, sexy vampires were kind of always a thing back to Dracula, but explicitly overtly sexualized vampire novels were definitely a thing before Twilight. I think a lot of people forgot that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so this is my first time reading this book, which I feel a little bit like a scrub for admitting.
I don't know what's worse, you having not read it or me hating it and then completely changing my mind on it.
We can split the difference on the two of them, but this is a classic work of 20th century horror. Like we said, it is an updating of the Dracula story. King actually got the idea when he was teaching about Dracula, to a high school class about Dracula, and thought, hey, what would happen if he came back in the 20th century? The audiobook has a really good prologue that is narrated by King, where he describes a little bit of some of the philosophy behind this, which is if a vampire or something supernatural came back in a time of roads and cars and, basically modern information and sophistication and skepticism, all of those parts of society, would he be more likely to be successful in his aims or less likely? And like part of this is, part of the act of updating this is definitely King saying like, oh, I liked that book, I want to pay homage to it. But also, like, yeah, this is it tells a similar tale, but with completely different circumstances, right?
I'm assuming that what you listened to on the audiobook and what I read in the Kindle edition were the same. I think my favorite moment in that little prologue that Stephen King does is when he talks about how he wrote this book and his publisher said, well, Stephen, I don't know. If you do this, you're going to be typecast as a horror writer. And Stephen King just decided to plow through and go ahead anyway.
Yeah. I'll show you guys. Yeah, that is very funny. I forget what they wanted to what they wanted to have him publish instead. The only other like trivia factlet that I know is he wanted to call this book The Second Coming, which in a sense would make like that tracks, right? Like a new kind of birth, etc. Blah blah. However, his wife Tabitha said no, that's going to sound like an erotic religious novel. So they decided
it really does. It's a pretty uncouth title if you don't know exactly why it's being called that.
Exactly, yeah. And I think Salem's Lot is definitely the better way to go there. Although I will constantly call the book Jerusalem's Lot, and I will constantly call the town Salem's Lot. So,
is that a threat? Are you threatening me?
No, that's more of a warning. No, I just in making the notes it goes back and forth, so shrug. But yeah, this was King's second book. He said, screw you, I will be typecast as a horror author and become very rich off the back of it, thank you very much. And this definitely does read like a book written by a young author. It is interesting to see just kind of his early relationship with specifically like descriptions and adjectives come out to play. Like there are certain turns of phrase in this that are a little bit kind of hinky in terms of like, well, I don't know that adds anything. Like it's funny. I don't know, maybe because I'm a contrarian, to go back and like point at things that directly contradict what he said to do in On Writing.
I love that you can tell in these earlier books too how in love he is still with the craft of it.
Yeah.
I mean, he loves in these earlier books to make little references to Shirley Jackson, like all these masters of the short story type of thing. It's I think it's very, very charming seeing how much I mean, in this book, he has a main character that's a writer. I mean, like, and you can tell that, like, I don't know. I mean, he has a lot to be proud of. I mean, getting published and having something like Carrie be big, I mean, it's well deserved. I think everybody, like, I'm sure there was a phase that you went through in high school, and obviously he did for short story authors. I mean, God, I got so into beat stuff that it's embarrassing. Richard Brodigan and all that stuff. I mean, you're like 14 or 15.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody has like a phase that they go through, and I got stupid into like beat poets and authors, and oh, honey. Oh, teenage autumn.
That is the farthest that I got was reading On the Road, but that was about it. I never got into any of the weirder stuff.
But I feel like Stephen King was still young enough in this to still be, I don't know, trying some stuff out, like those short chapters and things that we'll see later. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah. He also tries to like mix up some epistolary stuff in this too. Like there's one chapter that is pretty much entirely told as like just like, oh, what if you could hear what was passing over the telephone lines? A little bit like again taking and updating the epistolary kind of form of Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's neat. It's like it's neat and experimental, and you can kind of see just like these nascent ideas and these nascent forms of things that King would go on to really explore, like, oh, how weird it is and how much of an event it is when a new store comes into a small town, right? The small town itself, like this is the first book chronologically of his that really kind of luxuriates in being about this whole town full of characters and kind of the dark secret and the kind of clannish nature that they have. It is so rich with that detail that I feel like I have to put a little apology at the front. There's no way we can talk about all of it in a single episode, so a lot of those details are going to be glossed over. I want to call out the ones that are really good when we get to them, because there are neat little scenes, but it, that is something we're just going to have to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, he is very much kind of settling into, you can see the seeds of what you're going to see, like with it later on. You see kind of the introduction of the precocious young kid who, through knowledge of literature and just good old fashioned American gumption, is able to outwit and outpace everybody around him,
We have Jake 1.0. We have Proto Jake.
Yep, we have. Hello, I am Proto Jake. I just picture him like growing out of a vat. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like in the Venture Brothers when they have all the clones and the tanks.
Yeah, all the spare Deans and Hanks.
Yes.
So we should probably answer the question, why the hell are we talking about this on a Dark Tower podcast? We're talking about it here because Salem's Lot introduces a very important character who factors into the kind of the final trilogy of the series, Father Donald Callahan.
Oh yeah, that's a light way to say it, that he figures into the later trilogy. He's foundational.
It's very funny because Stephen King, for a while, after having published as Salem's Lot, said like, oh, I've got some ideas for a sequel. It's going to focus around Callahan. I feel like I've told Ben and Mark's stories. So he kicked those around and just kind of promised it every once in a while. And then eventually that sequel just became a very long section of Wolves of the Calla. And his entire story just collides headfirst with Roland's. He basically becomes like a last-minute addition to the Cottat.
Thanks, Gan.
Yep. It is a wheel. So we're going to get to see him. He's a little bit of a secondary character in this, although I think he is one of the kind of the most thoroughly drawn of the secondary characters.
Yeah, Stephen King's able to do a lot. I mean, I think if you look at the number of pages that Father Callahan's in numerically, I mean, he can't be in more than 20 or 30 pages.
Right.
Gosh, I hope no one counts and checks that and proves me wrong. But
if they do, it's their problem.
Autumn Hugh is actually on 473 pages of the book. But anyway, like you said, he's just so cleanly drawn. I mean, you really just get a nice picture of him. I mean, you are introduced to him early, and then you don't see him for probably a third of the book, 2/3 of the book, and then he's back. And I mean, like you said a little bit earlier before we started, it's really interesting to see the backstory of somebody that figures so prominently in book 5.
Yes. Yeah, I came to book 5 originally knowing vague details about Salem's Lot, mostly related to Barlowe himself, and then also like the lasting image that everybody else has kind of grabbed from this, which is the child vampire floating outside the window.
Oh, yeah, I watched the before we got started. I made sure that I had watched both of the trailers for both of the TV miniseries, 1979 and 2004, I believe. And oh yeah, there's a lot of floating kids.
Yep. He works in a little bit of Children of the Corn into this too. Like the primary vector of the initial vampire infection is kids, even infants, which is kind of fucked up. An infant. God, poor Randy.
Oh, Randy.
Pour one out for Randy.
Nothing good happens to Randy in this book.
Randy never stood a chance. Yeah. So the other thing that makes this relate to the back half of the Dark Tower series is the fact that King's vampires, introduced here but then thoroughly classified later on in the Tower books, like they become kind of part of the rank and file of the Crimson King's forces, right?
Yeah, the Crimson King wouldn't have the cute, sexy vampires. He'd have the gross ones.
Well, he just for contrast, he needs to boost. He needs to boost his self-esteem.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got to bring in the crazy razor mouth vampires for this.
That's a good strategy. I should embrace that for rolling up to the bar. I'll just get my grossest, most vampire-y friends, not cute vampire kind. Just kind of greasy looking, sallow, and just roll up to the club.
You want to roll up with some Nosferatu, no Tremors, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Like Peter from What We Do in the Shadows. Definitely, definitely that.
I owe What We Do in the Shadows a rewatch. It has been too long since I've seen What We Do in the Shadows.
What a perfect film.
It is so good. Oh man, Jermaine. Anyway, there are two short stories that are kind of like related to what happens in this. There's a story called Jerusalem's Lot. That's kind of Lovecraftian story set in 1850, but like it is set around this. And then there's also One for the Road, which kind of shows that the ending of this book didn't really work out. It shows a family that got stuck in Jerusalem's Lot after the vampire plague took it. Both of those are in Night Shift, which came out shortly after this book. This book came out. Have you read either of those?
I have not actually. I was kind of hoping this would come up. I finished the book, and as I mentioned, I read it on the Kindle app. I noticed that as I was getting closer to the final page, because the pages are numbered, I think 452, it still showed that I had about 20% of the book left. So I was like, well, maybe it's just dead space or something. There seems to be another like 50, 60 pages of content at the end. I noticed it's not on the notes that we'll be covering today, and I did not remember it from the earlier ones that I had written. So I believe that they've gone back and put some expanded content in the Kindle one, which I'm looking forward to reading.
Very strange. So I imagine they probably put those two stories in at the end of it. There's another edition of the book that came out in the mid 2000s that is like an expanded illustrated version where they kind of did a little bit of a The Stand extended edition where they put in like deleted scenes or expanded scenes or stuff.
And I believe that that's what is at the end of the Kindle edition for anyone that's looking to make a purchase.
Okay, cool. I do not have those included, mostly because I made my notes off of the audiobook version.
I did not read them yet because, as I mentioned, I finished the book a little bit earlier today, and I was like, please don't let Cole have notes on this additional 60 or 70 pages.
Yeah,
We're recording in 35 minutes.
That's too much. No, I would not. That's too much. Apparently that expanded edition was incredibly expensive when it came out too. So I don't know how many people outside of the Kindle ecosystem have actually gotten a chance to read that.
Wow.
Yeah. But let's jump into it. Let's get started with this prologue, which is sufficiently mysterious. We have this man and this boy who are running from their past in a town called Jerusalem's Lot. This town that we are now led to believe is completely dead. If they're not comparing it to the Lost Colony of Roanoke, then it's definitely implied. And they land in Mexico, where the boy enters the Catholic Church, and the man is kind of watching the newspapers for any kind of activity that might relate to what they were running from.
It's a really idyllic sort of thing. They're in Los Zapatos, right? Mm-hmm. Which he gets a kick out of, meaning the shoes.
Yep.
In Spanish, but there's some beautiful lines. I mean, they're out in rural Mexico. Their day-to-day life seems great. He's teaching the boy on his own. He's learning. There's a line in there. They drew their water from the well by hand. I mean, It sounds very romantic, except there's this palpable dread. Yes. Something's not right.
Yeah. It's no good, because you get the sense that disaster is kind of nipping right at their heels, and like neither of them sleeps well either. Like they are constantly having these nightmares about what has happened back there. Mm-hmm. I don't think either of these characters are named at this point. Is just the man and the boy. Yes. We are also led to believe that the man and boy are not father and son. So something is happening. And we're going to go find out with part one of the novel, The Marston House. A good part of this first third of the book is really dedicated to the history of the town. Before our main character arrives, and his lovingly described Citroen. It is never just his car. It is always his Citroen.
Something that's a little bit funny, since we were talking about other vampires earlier, I was looking it up so I could figure out how to pronounce Citroen, and I believe I have not actually seen the television series Buffy the Vampire Slayer, But apparently one of the characters in there, Giles, drives a Citroen, which I just thought that it was interesting that such a obscure car would show up in two vampire-related properties.
Oh, that has to be intentional.
I imagine it would be, and maybe that's like the first thing, like in every single like listicle about 10 things you should know about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Like maybe that's the most 101 obvious thing, but I was kind of surprised at that when I looked it up.
Yeah. So do you want to know, do you want a horrifying confession? I've never seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer either. So
okay.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whew, we're getting real tonight, Cole.
Yeah. I just had never, I didn't watch it when I was on, and like it kind of seemed like one of those shows where
if you're not part of the zeitgeist,
yeah,
you can't really go back.
Like it's available, but then there are people who say like, oh, skip season 1, but watch these particular episodes from season 1 to get this, or read this guy. Like
it's not like somebody's like, man, I just heard about this show called Lost, and I'm really about to get into it. You know,
right.
in 2018.
No, definitely not the case. We did an Abject Suffering episode about the Lost, the video game they made of Lost, like the spinoff kind of thing, and people were still saying like, oh my gosh, you should totally go watch Lost. And I'm like, nah, I'm good.
Did you have anybody write in and complain about spoilers? Hey, guys.
No. We don't know anything to spoil is the thing. So, but yeah, let's talk a little bit about the history of this town. There are only a couple of incidents that factor in very heavily. We should talk about the name. It is named after a notable local pig. a pig named Jerusalem, who is a real character, was knocking people over, and people said, oh, that's Jerusalem's lot. And so there you go. It's a town in rural Maine, as King is wont to do.
I would be remiss if I did not mention that in the census of 1970, Salem's lot had 1,319 inhabitants.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Yeah. There's also there's one line that I read, and I was like, Autumn's going to highlight that, where one of the characters' moms goes into a hospital with a gun and draws it like some dusty, ageless gunslinger.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were correct. I highlighted
it. Nice. But yeah, it's a tiny town. The most notable feature of which is kind of this massive mansion that sits on a like an overlook on a mountain, almost kind of presiding over the town like a dark idol. Eventually, the main character calls it. This is the Marston House that was owned by a mafia hitman named Hubie Marston and his wife. All kinds of rumors and stuff, abound about this particular house, up to and including and even through to today, especially because Hubie Marston hung himself in the attic. Also, I love this, that the house is the house is a booby-trapped hoarder nest before we even knew what to call hoarders. Mm-hmm. I know that Stephen King, when he was describing or writing this, writing the descriptions of what they found when they went to get Hubie, he was like, oh, remember that apartment in New York in like the early 20th century with those two twin brothers who hoarded newspapers? Like one of them died under a deadfall that he rigged up to keep people away. Yeah. That is definitely what Stephen King was reading when he wrote that.
Yeah, this is just a very expansive murder apartment.
Yes. But even crazier, Mrs. Marston was seen at Hubie's graveside making these sick incantations about the Lord of Flies around this. There's no sense no sense avoiding spoilers because we're going to talk about all this stuff anyway. Hubie Marston had been in contact with the evil that was going to roost here. He had never actually met Barlowe, but him and his wife ended up kind of preparing the house and doing all of these kind of sick rituals and sacrifices and things like that in order to basically prepare and desecrate the ground so Barlowe could live here.
That's the one thing that it's for this book. It's a little tough for me to be a mature reader about because I want more Marston lore.
Yep.
And I mean, it's just enough. It's just enough to give you a feeling that it's eerie, it's wrong, it's dark. I mean, it just titillates you with a little bit of knowledge. But I want detail for detail. The day that they built the house, like I want a whole prequel book.
Yeah, I forget like what the one line was, but it was like, okay, well, how many people did he kill for the mob? And it's like, okay, well, how high can you count? Like, I want to read about his travails and how they got messed up in the dark arts.
When you're affiliated with the mob and with the Lord of Lies. I really want to know a little bit more about you from a distance, a comfortable distance,
right.
but I got to know more.
Yeah.
Give me the deets.
And I need more than the 2 books that ever got written about the subject in the fiction here, and all of the kind of half muttered rumors that outsiders don't get to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, shortly after Marston's death, I believe in like 1941, I believe, a wildfire took out half of the town. The reason the dates get a little bit soupy for me is I forget that this book came out in 1975. Which, although it is pretty modern, also messes up like what wars happened recently. So like 1939 feels like it is implausibly in the past. Mm-hmm. More so that like a character alive in 1975 couldn't have been around to see this place when it happened. Right.
It's like that time dilation where Martin Luther King Jr. and Anne Frank were born in the same year, right?
Oh geez. Huh.
But you just remember them completely differently. I saw that floating around Twitter the other day, and I just sat there and just stared at my phone for a while, and I was like, "No, that doesn't. No,
that's not. I need to double check that." Yeah. Huh. I never knew that fact either. Huh. Anyway, but yes, this wildfire took out half of the town. We have these disasters. This, it's a small town with a big, outsized, dark past. And Ben Mears factors into that somewhat. Factors more into his dark future, but we'll get there. Enter Ben Mears, the Stephen King author character, the surrogate, the main guy. He hasn't gotten to the point where his writer characters are also the most troubled. Like Ben Mears is just a real, upright kind of guy. The only problem that he has is that his wife, or was it his girlfriend? I forget, Miranda, whoever she was to him, died in a motorcycle accident while he was driving. But he's like a moderately successful writer who has an embattled relationship with the critics. And he rides into town. He had been here as a child, but left shortly after he had a traumatic experience with the Marston house. He had gone in there on a dare, like an initiation thing, and saw a vision, like an apparition of Hubie Marston hanging in the attic. What do you think of Ben?
I want to be mad that or disappointed that he's a Gary Stu, but I really like him.
Yeah.
I like the little snippets that you get about, I mean, I don't mind seeing what a Stephen King, when this book was written, would have been like. As you mentioned, I like that he's having a little trouble with the critics, that maybe his first book was successful and his second books are a little bit not as much. I love, as we'll see later, that he's such a dedicated writer, just like Stephen King. He gets up every day and he writes his work. I mean, he's obviously got quite the work ethic. But yeah, Ben's he's just a good guy.
Yeah. And that comes across like he has very few like pretensions about his dealings with other people. Like he is more than game to like to get back into small town life, and like gets along with the other boarders at the house where he goes to live at, and kind of just becomes somebody who is both trusting and trustworthy. So you run into a little bit of a problem of like, oh, he is both honorable and good. Like those are a bit of his character traits, but like, you're kind of happy to see him get through it, even though I think, in the intro, King said like he didn't plan for Ben to live, but Ben was just more tenacious than he expected him to be.
Oh, that's a beautiful turn of phrase.
Yeah. But yeah, he's come back to Salem's Lot to write what would probably be an intolerable book about the nature of evil. Just kind of his idea, about the Marston house and about, the sprees of crimes that have happened in the area. But more as just kind of a way to conquer his childhood demons by being back in the town. He even plans to rent the Marston house and go live there. But he says, I'm never going to go in the attic.
There's some dark irony there that he's coming to get inspired about a book and to write his nightmares away, and probably what he thinks he's going to write is some vague haunted house thing, and instead, oh man, does he get a horror story going?
Yep. Bit off a little bit more than he could chew.
Yeah, I think that there's a thread of that runs throughout the book, of the irony of people getting exactly what they want.
Yep. Oh man, especially poor Susan's mom. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But we'll get there.
We got nothing but time.
Yeah. No, so Ben wants to rent the Marston house, but finds out that it's been purchased by this mysterious furniture dealer who has also moved to town. So he takes up residence in this boarding house, which honestly sounds pretty nice.
It does. It's charming.
Yeah. Lots of local characters living there, going in and out. It's a regular Hey Arnold situation. But yes, he's not in town very long before he finds somebody and he hits it off with Susan Norton. Very strange that her name is also Susan, but hey.
What is it about girls named Susan that apparently as soon as you meet one, the wheels of fate start turning and you're in love in like a week?
You're in love
less.
in a week, and then she is dead in a month or less. The wheels of fate start turning and it grinds her to a paste. Yes.
Exactly, man. We got a Susan in the frame.
Yeah, that's it's like the red shirts in Star Trek. Oh no, her name's Susan. She's definitely going down.
And I mean, what bigger turn on could there be for a writer like Ben that she's read your book? And is she holding it?
No, she's reading it at the time. Like he's walking through the park and she recognizes him. This is the point. So like Susan's fine. Like she serves her purpose in a way that I'm sure could be regressive in some readings. Like, oh, she exists to die, so the main character has a motivation. She's fine, even in addition to that. Like she helps out and contributes to the to the cause of the hunt. All those kinds of things. But like this is definitely wish fulfillment that the author rolls into a small town from his childhood. Somebody is just happening to read his books and immediately wants to like hop in his arms.
Yeah, that was a freebie.
Yep. Oh man, yeah. I've been saying that was a freebie a lot recently because I just been rewatching Arrested Development.
Yeah.
Oh well, but yeah, they hit it off. And she breaks things off with Floyd Tibbetts. He sounds like a real ninny. Poor.
Yeah. Floyd's not we don't see a ton of Floyd, but what we do see and hear about him is not that great. He sounds really just a boring jock.
Yeah, boring jock, hangs out at the watering hole. Sincerely. All you need to know about him is that Susan's mom wants her to be with him, right?
Yeah.
So
Susan's mom. I mean, Susan and her mom are a bit of a prototype for Fran and her mother in The Stand.
Yeah.
But Stephen King has a gift for these difficult relationships with daughters and mothers, and it makes me wonder what his wife's relationship with her mother is. Oh. Or actually, because again, when you see a lot of these little things keep cropping up in Stephen King's stuff, I wish I knew more about his own backstory, how Stephen King came up, who a lot of these characters are pulled from.
Yeah. It'd be good to know, especially for the ones that do end up becoming tropes like this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. These kind of repeating elements. It's not a good relationship, regardless.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Ben does get along very well with Susan's dad.
Yeah, Susan's dad seems like a good guy.
Yeah, and I'm kind of sad that he just disappears from the book.
Yeah. Well, at least we don't have to see him drinking anybody.
This is true, although he definitely doesn't get out of this alive. Because only 2 people do. Well, I guess 3. 2.5. 2.5 people get out of this alive.
There's this one line in here when he's first meeting Susan, or maybe when they're having ice cream together or whatever, but he talks about how in his head Ben is making up a Playboy article about himself. Uh-huh. And that just tickled me to death. Like, just because, there's always that like phrase that everyone says about I subscribe to Playboy for the articles. Like, I imagine Playboy for the articles just tickles me to death.
Yeah. Well, he's a writer, so he definitely has this this opinion of Playboy that is entirely like, I either want to be featured in this or I want them to buy stories from me.
Yeah, but instead of fantasizing about the tasteful nudes within, he's literally fantasizing about the articles.
Yep. that is very funny. One of my favorite details. This is a little bit later in the story when because Ben's the newcomer, he's the outsider in the small town. Everybody gets all the details about his past. They learn about his girlfriend / wife who died in the motorcycle accident. Susan's mom is like, he was drunk when this happened, and it was like, no, he wasn't. And just because she'd heard the story, and the mom says, "Well, they gave him the breathalyzer. You know they don't give you the breathalyzer unless you're drunk, honey." So that's exactly what we're working with.
Her math checks out.
Yep. Yeah.
Speaking of math, I just have to get it out of the way. There's this one part in this section, somewhere in the first 30 or 40 pages, where they do mention that Jerusalem's lot was also incorporated in 1765, which those digits add up to 19.
Huh. Yeah, you're right. Huh. Yeah,
I can't believe you did that math so fast. You're like, oh, you're right.
Yeah, it's not like I needed to double check you, but you said it, and then I immediately did the calculation. Like, oh yeah, huh.
I did it on my phone just to make sure, because I'm like, ooh, that would be embarrassing.
No, that's man, it is so hard to know what is intentional, because he laces it so hard throughout the back half of the series. That would be the craziest long game to ever play, probably. Anyway, so the Marston house, like we said, Ben cannot rent it because a year ago, this strange bald man named Richard Straker, I cannot help but imagine Straker as Agent 47 from Hitman. I know that he is meant to be a little bit more tasteful than that video game character, but he's definitely off-putting. I love the description. He speaks with no accent. So Straker is good, and you definitely get the idea that Straker is the main bad guy more than anything. Good.
Did you catch that when he was introducing himself that he said that my name is Straker, Richard Throckett Straker? Throckett is what you call a group of Billy Bumblers.
Throcken.
Throckett, Throckett, a Throckett of Billy Bumblers, and Straker's middle name is Throckett.
Huh? I thought it was Throcken.
Is it?
With an en? I don't know.
Oh.
Do a search on that to make sure that I'm.
Well, I'm searching it right now.
To make sure that I'm correct.
It is Throcken. No, you're completely right.
False alarm, but I appreciate the vigilance.
No, this is saying Throckett later on.
Huh.
The weirdest words there's a Vulture article that is saying that it's Throckett.
Okay. I will keep an eye out for that. That would be he must really just enjoy that combination of syllables and just decide to carry forward.
Tim Ross met a Throckett of Bumblers in the forest beyond Faginard.
Maybe it's the case. So maybe it's the case that Throcken is singular and Throckett is a whole bunch of them. I forget, and I don't know what to search for enough to do that search gracefully on the air.
Yeah, if the Billy Bumblers come a knocking, they're probably in a Throcken, right?
Yep. Throckett and Tubbs. No, but there's this notable scene. Like, there's a local real estate developer, who's a little bit crooked. Straker comes and makes this deal saying, "Hey, we'll take the Marston house and the storefront on the main drag there. I'll give you $1 plus this patch of land where I know that they're going to build a mini mall in town. And also, hey, I need you to move some stuff around, including possibly my boss."
Yeah.
Yeah. This real estate guy sends some dudes down to a dock to get to get like crates of furniture and stuff. One of them is not has not been touched by customs, and that is definitely Barlow's casket shipped with some soil from his native land,
which is just Dracula as hell.
Yep. So it is very cool, their bewilderment. But yeah, Straker is out just giving people the willies all over town, acting as an agent for Kurt Barlowe, who is never seen. We only get one glimpse of Barlowe in this entire part of the book. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Ben goes out drinking with another tenant at the house there, Weasel, who's an alcoholic. Probably not cool to go drinking with an alcoholic, but it was a different time. And there they meet Matt Burke, who is the local English teacher. He's beloved. Ben and Matt hit it off. Ben says, "Hey, you strike me as a Van Helsing figure." No, they say that later. They call it the resemblance to Van Helsing later.
I love Matt. Matt's so cool.
Matt's so good. He's like a proto Glenn Bateman.
He's like that teacher that everybody wishes that they had in school. You know, just cool old Mr. Matt.
Yeah, it's like, man, why can't I have Mr. Burke in junior year too? He was so good in sophomore year. He's wasted on those young pieces of shit. But yeah, they hit it off, and Matt becomes a major character in this. We're also introduced to Mark Petrie, proto Jake being grown in his tube. He's this bookish young boy who kind of establishes his character by beating up a bully twice his size. Good old Richie. And Mark is just supernaturally good and on top of it. He uses his agility to beat Richie instead of his strength, knowing that all bullies are just big stinky butt faces.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Mark is the Gary stew. I mean, he's a good, smart boy who definitely the bully deserves it, and he relies on his wits and his limited skill. I mean, he's who wouldn't want to be little Mark? I
mean, it's a bit of a triad, right? Because you have Ben, who is the successful writer, early on in his career, like King was at the time. You have Mark, who is the bookish young kid who solves his problems with brains, not brawn, like King probably imagined himself to be, as a big fan of all kinds of pulp stories and stuff. And then you have the old high school teacher in Matt, who is, beloved by everybody in the community, just like King was a high school teacher at the time, and he probably wanted to be like Matt if he continued down that road.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they form a good boy triad.
Yep. A good boy triad that can do no wrong. So those are all the pieces that need to be on the board for right now. Let's talk about kind of the rising action of this, which starts with a terrible thing that happens to two local children, Ralphie and Danny Glick. I want to give you room to describe their fate and reflect on it.
Well, they're on their way over to go hang out with cool kid Mark, the new guy in town who has all of these monster figurines, Draculas, Frankensteins, Wolfmen, and they know that their parents, or their mother in particular, would not like for them to go over and look. They're going through the woods. They start to hear some noises. Ralphie and Danny get separated, and Danny's just gone. Ralphie stumbles back home. He's in shock. Nobody can figure out, what's going on. He mentions, I believe, seeing a dark shape, but otherwise, he's just missing. So the townspeople get out and about, and they're beating the bushes, including our hero Ben, who is out there searching for him as well. It's always scary when something happens to a child. I think that was a clever way for Stephen King to do this, because it's like a slap in the face that a kid goes missing right away.
Yeah, especially in a small town like this. Like, it definitely it makes a lot of sense to like gather everybody around this.
Yeah, you'd think that you'd go look at like somebody, like a quiet lady that keeps to herself, that's on Meals on Wheels or something like that. But like, nope, the boys are in town. Mr. Straker's in town, and we're just going to right for a kid.
Yeah, we're going right for a kid. Like, we need to grab nab Ralphie Glick, because like the one final sacrifice needs to be made. To desecrate the ground, right? What happens with Ralphie and Danny is it starts something that I actually really like about this book. It's not like it lacks gore, right? There are definitely times later on where they describe massive geysers of blood rushing out of people's mouths and stuff like that. But like for a lot of these attacks that happen, the bites or the initial takings, it is described almost from the point of view of the person who is being entranced.
Mm-hmm.
who is being offered the thing they most want, so they will submit to the bite, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like you never actually get a lot of detail about the way that they meet their end. What you instead get is a glimpse at what they want most.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. It is a good and tasteful choice in a novel that, by all rights, had every incentive to be as trashy as possible.
Mm-hmm. I did want to mention at some point too. I think I can't remember if it was right before this or right afterwards, but there was also a black and white dog that had been hung up on a fence.
Yeah,
Which
go ahead.
it's another accident of birth that we see, just like the Little Sisters of Illyria, because this dog happened to be black and white and was born with 2 white spots over its eyes, which I guess in terms of vampire lore is something that's really repellent to vampires. But yeah, poor little dog wasn't born with a cross on his chest like he needed to be.
Nope, no. Well, it wouldn't have it wouldn't have done any good, because Straker is not one of the children of the night, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so all Straker had to do has something to ward off a vampire. You would take a black dog and put like angel feathers or scales over his eyes, like with paint or whatever. Mm-hmm. And this dog just kind of naturally had them. So I read that and I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I knew that when we were talking about the Little Sisters of Illyria, because that definitely makes a little bit more sense with that doggo, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
this doggo just had to be baffled. Like, what?
Wait a minute. Why did I get the raw end of the deal? Come on.
Straker's a pretty good assistant, though. I mean, he's like, ooh, I know that Barlowe would not like that. Let me just go ahead and take care of that.
Yeah, let's just nip this one in the bud.
I mean, he's a pretty good assistant.
Like later on when they go searching for all of the like stereotypical anti-vampire supplies, and all of them have been bought out.
Yes.
Because Barlowe had sent Straker to basically put in orders on all the roses and stuff. Yeah, so Straker's on top of it.
That's actually my favorite thing later, and I know we'll get to that later, but the idea that like all these wild roses, that they were going to deck themselves in them, it just reminds me of going to hunt vampires. It like you're dressed to go to Coachella, like flower crowns, high-waisted jean shorts, gladiator sandals, like you would just have the same outfit on, because vampires don't like roses. Like you were going to see Lana Del Rey, you would just wear that exact outfit.
Yeah,
for hunting vampires.
And what happens? What happens if vampires descend on Coachella? Well, first off, you have my new Amazon original single, and second off, guess what? All those people with the roses, they're holding all the cards.
Yeah, they're safe.
Yeah, they can get out of there. Sorry, Lana.
Yeah, Lana Del Rey, vampire hunter.
Yeah. So. But the aftermath of this is pretty sad. They're not able to find Ralphie. Danny falls ill. He's not a waiter in the daytime. He says, "Mom, Dad, I'm a vampire. Please help me." Nobody really knows what to do with him. He dies of what the doctors can only describe as pernicious anemia. And of course, the details about what happens with him at the morgue end up slipping out, and eventually his body goes missing. What do you think of this horrifying scene at Danny's funeral, where his dad is just in shock and leaps on the coffin?
It's one of the most impactful things that you can see in film or read in books. I've actually had this conversation with Jeremy that I'd like to put in my living will that he goes ahead and gets into the grave, and I promised him I'll do vice versa, just because, I mean, it's respectful,
right. Yeah.
just like getting messy at the funeral. Like, how else would you know someone was loved?
Right. No, you got to go above and beyond.
But you do feel so badly for these parents. I mean, the parents are effectively like ghosts at this point. They've lost the boy. It's kind of creating a situation where, I mean, the whole family's adrift, and Mark Petrie had such a close tie to them. I guess even though he was new in town, I mean, it really clues Mark into something not being quite right.
Right. Yeah. It's raw. Like that was hard. Like eventually, like that can't happen. He's only 12 fucking years old. Like, God, geez. Yeah. So. Anyway, there's a similarly upsetting scene where a character who I thought was going to be a little bit more major, and I guess he's major in the plot, but like major in terms of the quartet, Mike Ryerson, kind of this regular good old boy gravedigger. He is setting about burying Danny. You know, he's reflecting on how senseless it is that they drape the plastic grass over the dirt at the funeral, like that. You know, he's reflecting on that, but then he gets this creeping feeling that ultimately turns into this psychosis that Danny is. His eyes are open in the casket, and he's staring up. And like, I need to open the casket. I need to close his eyes. I need to let him out. Like, and he, you know, is in the process of burying it. You know, jumps in and starts like unburying it with his hands. And eventually, I mean, like this is how Danny gets let out. This is how Danny avoids being buried.
And there is nothing more. I mean, it's a I don't know if it's quite a trope, but I mean, this is something that we see. I mean, the child vampire is, I think, one of the most effective uses of horror in any vampire thing. It's just so somehow inappropriate.
Let the right one in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, and they King is definitely not ashamed to use it. Just the fact that it begins that way, and basically throughout the entire. I don't think Danny is ever taken down. I think that Danny is just left to his own devices throughout the rest of this to go out infecting people. So
yeah, little lost boy just floating around.
Yeah. Yeah. So while this is happening, or around the time that this happens, Mark Petrie is going out exploring, and he finds his way into the basement of the Marston house and discovers mutilated remains and clothing that definitely belonged to Ralphie. Again, putting all these pieces together that something is wrong up there. And Mark is, you know, practical enough to know that nobody will believe him if he said it. He's just going to hold this one under his cap for now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this part of the book comes to a head. Mike Ryerson is incredibly sick. Matt has gone to the watering hole, you know, just for his nightly drink, and sees Matt. He initially thinks that Matt's on drugs, like that Mike was on drugs. You know, Mike was a former student of Matt's, and Matt, I think, definitely has a very reasonable hang up about being a teacher. Is like, oh, you get to see the horrible ends that your students come to sometimes. So he's incredibly worried about him. When he finds out, like, hey, I'm sick, I don't trust myself to be alone. I can't take care of myself. Matt invites him in, and it is during this stay that a floating Danny Glick rises outside of Mike's window and finishes the job.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that the stages of infection that everyone goes through. I mean, it does seem like a lot of these people have just the worst hangover at first. You know, they're a little bit lice sensitive, food's repellent, they're thirsty. I mean, that hangover thing. It's interesting that it's a feeding process, like that. It's a slow creeping feeding, and not just, hey, one and done, you're all converted, you're vampires now.
Yeah. I've never conceived of hangovers as a slow rejection of all that is human and holy, but I can totally I can totally get down with that. Yeah. No, it sucks, especially as it starts spreading. Like, again, not to draw connections to like just like anything and everything, but like the way that this spreads, and eventually the way that that Salem's Lot becomes written off as a total loss. I'm kind of like, oh yeah, this feels a little bit like a practice round for The Stand, almost. Like this town is done for, and nobody knows it yet. Yeah.
Oh, I just got to it in my notes. One bumbler is a throcken. A group of bumblers is a throcket. You're totally correct.
Okay, cool. No, you were correct. I revised myself. Yeah.
God, we're both correct. Yeah. We're so good at this. We should start a podcast.
Yeah. Maybe people would listen. Yeah. No. So, yeah. And this section ends with, Mike being in dire straits, by which I mean dead and infected. But we get Barlowe, his first appearance here, as he goes out to meet the very poorly named Dud. That's right, Salem's Lot got the Dud. Yeah, I feel bad for Dud. Like, he's a hunchback. He didn't get dealt a lot of good cards. He's definitely from circumstances.
Whoa, 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 whoa. I feel bad for human Dud. Vampire Dud is living the dream.
Okay, this is true. Vampire Dud gets to be the Lord of Rats.
Lord of Rats, he gets the girl. He gets Vampire Ruthie, finally. He doesn't just have to keep looking at her all creepy. Yeah. I mean, everything's coming up Vampire Dud.
Yeah, and all he has to do is make this little deal with Barlowe to stop burning and shooting all the rats.
Yeah, just one very small thing.
Just one very, very tiny, to stop doing your job and you'll get everything you ever wanted. Oh, that sounds amazing. Can I do that?
Yeah, exactly. Everything's coming up evil done.
Yeah. So you're right. Fuck the dud. So but yeah, so one thing that's cool, and it's not explicitly called out until later on, but like initially Barlowe is described as this, incredibly aged man, has like a wispy, like old man European mustache, hair is swept back or whatever. But like as the novel goes on and he starts making more and more appearances, his description becomes just a little bit more healthy, a little bit younger, a little bit more put together. That like as all of this goes on, he is able to feed in the chaos and basically revitalize himself by being in his element.
Nothing's ever going to top that Gary Oldman bouffant that he had at the beginning of it. But
Never.
I have to imagine it's the same type of progression that we're going through here. I'm pretending that Barlowe has the bouffant.
I love that. That movie is so goofy. Yeah. This takes us to part 2, The Emperor of Ice Cream, which is explicitly a reference to a Wordsworth poem, I think. It's presented in its full text at the beginning as part of the not epigraph, but you know what I mean.
It's not a poem that I was familiar with before this book at all. Like sometimes the things for Stephen King, it's something that you did read in a high school literature class or that you just encountered. But this was completely new to me, The Emperor of Ice Cream. Yeah,
I'm looking at this. I want to make sure that I have it correct. No, it's Wallace Stevens is the guy. On its face, that is a really goofy name for something. Like, haha, Ice Cream Man, lol. But no, like it is a poem about funeral preparations. Mm-hmm. It's a good poem. I like it. It is apt, and that is something that whether it's pop lyrics or little snippets of stories or poems, King is very good at picking these initial little kind of scene setter quotes for parts of his books and things. What I love about this whole section of the book is just how ride or die Matt and Ben are.
Oh yeah. They're just like Will Smith and Martin Lawrence in Bad Boys, you know?
they're just in for it. Like, their friendship is, it is young. It is a young friendship that they have embarked upon. However, Ben finds Matt totally credible. So when Ben gets a call from Matt saying like, hey, can you come on over and maybe bring a cross? That Ben not only gets up and leaves the house, but goes and immediately is like, yeah, well, let's take care of this. It's not. Go ahead.
I really appreciated Susan being so much more incredulous about this later, because it does seem a little bit like Ben's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Yeah. Oh, vampires are real. It is what it is.
Yep. Well, I guess that's what it is. Like, there's a whole I love the whole back and forth with Ben and Susan. Like, it's not really reflected in the notes because it ultimately doesn't have a lot to do with the main plot. It is more characterization. But like, Ben tries to persuade Susan by saying, "Okay, take the word can't out of your vocabulary. If the only evidence that you have, or the only argument that you have against this explanation for what's going on is, oh, that can't happen, then that's not exactly, that's not exactly firm ground to stand on, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, into it, into it, and just into just the whole description, just like the process that Mike's body goes through, when they call the police and call in the medical examiners and stuff. Like, just the fact that so much of this is on rails. Like, they say, like, they say offhandedly, let's start the machinery, and then realize exactly how mechanical all of it is. It is very good, because you see you see this supernatural end and what is potentially an incubating supernatural being put up against like modern corpse disposal, not technology, but just details and procedure, right? It's good. They deal with Mike Ryerson's arrangements. They get him sent away. They manage to shake the heat just a little bit. We should talk a little bit about the sheriff or the constable, whose name I forget, but he is definitely the most useless piece of shit in literature.
Oh my God. At the very end, which I know we're not there yet, but just like, I'm out. There's an assault rifle in the cabinet over there. Yeah. I'm abandoning my post, gonna go live with my sister.
Yep. All I managed to do over the course of this entire story, where people are dropping like flies in my town, of 1319, all I've managed to do was dig up some details about your past, Ben Mears, Mr. Author Man.
He didn't even seem as stressed as you would think he would be about a missing boy in a town of like 1,300 some odd people. He's just like, well, I got to check on the outsiders.
Yeah, exactly.
I talked to you and I talked to Straker. I don't know what else we can do to find this boy. I talked to two guys.
Leave it up to the FBI. Maybe you guys should call the cops. What are you talking about? Yeah, I just every time this guy came up, I was like, oh, this piece of work. Come on.
Yeah. Yep.
But they make the deal with Mike Ryerson's arrangement. But the next thing, he is back in Matt's house. He's floating above his bed, and there's this whole like altercation. You know, they have managed to put together crosses. They ultimately managed to fend him away, but in the process, Matt has a heart attack.
So this book is very rich in heart attacks.
Yeah, mostly aimed at Matt. Mostly aimed at poor Matt. That academic's life caught up to him. Yeah. And this gets Dr. James Cody involved. I love how they do the whole like pan away while the explanation of what happened up to this point happens.
I love the doctor. Didn't he make a cross out of tongue depressors? Like,
yes,
what
he
a
did.
Renaissance man.
Yeah. It's just like catch as catch can, right? Yeah. Cody is a little bit more skeptical, but he is definitely more in the line of like, all right, well, let's see what happens. You definitely like, I can get you in there under the pretense of like examining him for a particular kind of encephalopathy, but you cannot stake his body in the morgue. Like, we would definitely go to jail.
Yeah.
So. Again, very funny. James Cody exists just to die.
But he's so impactful. I almost like him as much as he's just a good guy.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Another good boy has been added to the. Now it's there's a duo, then there's a trio. What do you call it when it's just a foursome, right?
A foursome, a tetrad.
A quartet. We get a good boy quartet.
I think it's a tetrad. So,
this whole section too. Stephen King does such a good job when they're finding this stuff out, and we're seeing the evil kind of slowly creep through the town. All those small little stories, the ones who's having an affair with whom, who's abusing their child, who's doing this and that. When he talks about the town as a oh God, I'm pulling the Sex and the City thing. New York is a character, but when he talks about the town as a character, basically, and just how this evil is creeping into it, I think it's some beautiful writing.
Oh yeah, and just like the way that it almost existed specifically to let this spread, to let it spread behind the drawn shades, right?
It's like one long Bruce Springsteen song,
Yep.
About things just not going great in this small town.
Oh my gosh, just that cheating couple story. That's brutal. I didn't care for that one bit.
Yeah, it reminded me a little bit of that section in The Stand where there's the progression of accidental deaths.
Oh yeah.
After the big thing, it kind of reminded me of that. Just these little snapshots that you see of little lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you could definitely tell like that he is luxuriating in that, right? He just wants the opportunity to describe these little failings, right? These little scenes of just people not really at their best, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see here. Like during this time, like you said, Danny Glick is spreading his vampirism. This is where like the one of those little short stories that you alluded to really stuck out to me. The death of Randy McDougal, who never had a chance. Like it was a bit of a minor recurring plot beat, like Randy and his mom, who was like 17 years old. She got married. It was like a shotgun wedding, and they're living in a trailer, and it's not really, it wasn't really working out too much for them. But like, she ends up beating her infant son, which is too bad.
It's amazing how Stephen King does such a good job on drawing you in on this that you're more fascinated than. And I know that's an odd thing to say about something that's really horrifying, but like he creates this level of empathy. Like it's not something you would ever do, but you have this moment of empathy. Like you can picture this character that's so frustrated and disappointed and this and that she's lashing out. I mean, it's just good writing.
Yeah. It's understanding without reaching sympathy. That like, oh, this is a mom that is completely not ready for what she what she is for what she is faced with, right?
But he just makes it so real and so plausible. While, like you said, there's not an ounce of sympathy. I mean, she's, poor Randy.
Oh yeah, well she initially hits him because he knocks something off the changing table or just something really trivial. But just the scene where Randy dies, where Randy kind of is given over to the vampire curse, is so tragic because she cannot accept. And she feels so guilty for the way that she treated Randy that like she starts like feeding him his favorite like chocolate pudding or chocolate custard and pretending like, hey, you're alive, you're enjoying this, it's your best chalky, right? And then when the pudding falls out of his mouth because he's gone, she completely loses it. Like that is.
It's an evocative scene.
Yeah, I like it. Like I kind of recoiled from that a little bit. Like
that is straight up. I don't know if there's a word for the type of horror that Stephen King does like this. Like it's just character horror. I mean, it's just I guess horror of the human condition. I guess.
Yeah. It's not. Yeah. I mean, I was about to say it's no good. Like it's good. It is very well done. But like it rises to be one of the things about this book that sticks out to me the most. In a book that has a lot of explicitly horrific things that happen.
Oh, I think I remember that and feel more uncomfortable with that than I do any of the staking, stabbings, bleedings, sexual interactions, anything like that. That's definitely one of those. It's an eye worm, I guess.
Yes. Eyeworm is a good
or brainworm, because I guess my eyes got the words into my brain.
Yeah. Well, your eyes were the conduit for the worm. They were there for a moment.
There's a lot of worms. Okay, that's all I'm saying.
So many worms. But yeah, Matt is in the hospital. He's bedridden, but he starts acting as the Van Helsing. He's doing research for them, kind of amassing all of these books about the occult, and they decide to get Father Callahan involved because they go for the Catholic Church, the one with the most kind of hoodoo behind it, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a deep thread of Catholic mysticism in some things. My one of the ladies that I ride horses with, I live in Louisiana and it's a pretty Catholic area, but there's definitely, like her Facebook posts and stuff, there's a lot of actively believing in witches, demons that hurt people's marriage. Like there's definitely a wellspring of Catholic mysticism that it seems like Father Callahan's a little bit more maybe tapped into than an ordinary priest would be.
Yes. I would like specifically Callahan is really disillusioned with the movement of the church toward more social consciousness as opposed, fighting social ills as opposed to the greater, cosmic evil ills that he maybe I think signed up to get on board with. And that's a little bit of a dissonance for me because like I think like, oh man, in my mind as a person who has no stake in this because I'm not religious, like, oh, like I'm good with the church like trying to like address racial inequality and poverty and stuff like that. And it's hard for me to get on board with Callahan, who specifically drinks because all of his colleagues care about those poor people and he wants to get out there and fight the devil.
Yeah, he's like, I'm into that witchy shit.
Yeah, he's into that witchy shit, but he's also like a borderline sociopath at points. Like, just well, we don't need like more bake sales. We need we need more people out there with guns being willing to do what they need to do. We need more abortions to to clear people out. Just like he is definitely like on some weird Old Testament shit that. I don't know, like with my current sensibility, it's hard for it to make him like a sympathetic character. I ultimately like Callahan because he goes through enough and comes out the other side being functional enough, but like that whole part of it, it's really hard to square away with like a modern conception of like the role of clergy in the community.
It's amazing to me how checked out Callahan is for the entire book. I mean, moments when he should be comforting people, or when he's looking at Ben and Matt with this distance, and he's more going through the Kubler-Ross model of, the stages of grief and like, oh, they're in shock, they're this and they're that. Mm-hmm. And then he offers, as opposed to offering them any form of comfort or relating to them in an emotional or sympathetic way whatsoever.
Yeah. It's, it's quite frankly a little bit hard to square, but like that ultimately I think becomes his failing, right? Because even though he professes to desire kind of a more primal kind of faith, he completely lacks it.
And let's just say that even though there's a fifth guy in the frame, this is not a quintet.
No, he's definitely not all there.
Yeah, he's not in the Good Boys Club.
No, he's not in the Good Boys Club. Like there's the Good Boys Club, and then there's like the auxiliary that comes up behind, and it is just Callahan saying, "Wow, the thing that got rid of the thing that got rid of evil wasn't the church. It was electric lights, and it was Freud." Like, what are you talking about, man?
It's interesting that the two people in the book who should be taking on these roles, the sheriff and the priest, mm-hmm. are the two most checked out, like least helpful people in the book.
Yeah, they're just completely going through the motions.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he's brought on board mostly to kind of arm them. Like I picture him rolling up as like the arms dealer in the Tarantino movie. Like, oh, I've got some good shit for you. Opens up the trunk of the car and like, okay, here's some crosses. Here's some garlic.
I can make as much holy water as I want. I'm a priest.
Yep. They don't keep track of it. So, oh man. So it's somewhere around this point, Ben gets taken out of the picture or hospitalized because a jilted Floyd has had poison poured into his ear by Barlowe to go take Ben off of the board, right?
I love the little detail that when Floyd, Susan's ex-boyfriend, comes to beat up Ben, he's wearing Playtex dishwashing gloves, mm-hmm. and like an overcoat and a hat and sunglasses. Like the idea of like coming out to brawl while wearing your yellow ladies dishwashing gloves, because it was in the 70s, so they only came in ladies sizes.
Oh, of course.
Like
yeah, like he was like dressed to hide himself from the sun. I'm not sure, like I don't think he was turned at that point, but he
he had the vampire hang around, the hangover.
Oh yeah, he definitely was doing that. But like I love the idea of him putting on the gloves almost like as a Berenstain Bears first Hitman adventure kind of thing. Like, I gotta hide my prints.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but Floyd Tibbets comes in and he is ultimately taken in by the cops, because that's one thing they know how to deal with, is drunk and disorderly. But Ben and Susan, they have their first and final sweet consummation. But with Matt and Ben hospitalized, it is up to Susan and Mark to go to the Marston house during the day to kind of feel things out, hoping to catch Barlowe and stake him.
I had read this book before, and I still got surprised because Susan has gone to the house by herself. She's spying on it, mm-hmm. and then she hears a noise behind her and feels a hand, and I was like, oh no, Straker got her. Like, it totally tricked me, even though technically this is my third time reading the book.
Yeah.
It got me.
I have this wrong, because Susan goes to scout things out, and it's Mark who's gone to do the same thing, right?
Yeah, and they run into each other, and Mark's like, "Hey, I know you," and she's like, "Ah!" I mean, he's lucky he didn't get staked with that little fence picket that she had with her.
Yeah, and he's like, "Oh no, I used my dad's wood shop to make an ashwood. I used his lathe to make an ashwood stake out of a baseball bat." Like, okay, you little overachieving nerd.
Yeah, well, is this an episode of This Old House? Come on, bro.
That'd be fine if it was an episode of This Old House.
But they team up and they go in together, and then stuff goes off the rails.
Yes, it does. Kind of unceremoniously. I should have seen this coming, because Susan is definitely the Lucy Westenra figure in this. You know, like she exists to be taken out for James Harker to, you know, go and deal with. But yeah, they are both captured. Susan is not so lucky as to have read a book about Houdini. She has taken and turned. Mark, however, has read a book about Houdini, so he does his escape artist trick as Strayer is tying him up. Like he flexes all of his muscles so that, you know, he's bigger when he's wrapped up, so the rope will be slacker. He makes himself real sweaty by thinking real sweaty thoughts, so he can get out of the bonds. It's actually a pretty cool scene. I don't know why I'm dunking on Mark so much.
Yeah, no, it is a pretty cool scene. I think that it's very cool that Mark's able to use this Houdini stuff and get out of his bonds. I get really bummed about Susan. I mean, the whole book, she's trying to get out from her mother's thumb. Floyd Tibbets isn't right. She's trying to get out from under his thumb. She has this nice moment with Ben where they make love. She initiates it, so she's kind of in the driver's seat and control the whole thing. And I think the line that Mark uses after she's turned is about Barlowe, and he says she's his now. Yeah. So she just ends up owned at the end of the book, and it's a real bummer. It
sucks. Yeah. I would have liked to have had her have a chance to subvert that, you know?
Yeah.
To be a little bit of her own person, even up through the end, but that was not the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sucks. Feel bad for Susan. I feel bad for her mostly. Ben as well, for having to put her down.
Everybody but Dad. Dad's having a good old week.
Oh yeah, Dad's out there partying.
Because once you're a vampire, nobody cares what you look like. It's dark outside.
Yeah, it's all blood from here. Yeah. So Mark gets another master stroke turn. He caves Straker's head in with a cot leg. You know, taking him out, but then he has to run away to save himself. Like Susan's already gone. Like he's here in the process. Barlowe, instead of like taking Straker in and, you know, getting him cured and nursing him back to health, basically figured, oh, you're useless to me now, so let me hang you upside down and let all the blood out of you, because blah blah. But then also let me get really upset at these meddling kids because they made me have to kill my best friend and most loyal servant. Okay.
You know, this is just a good object lesson, because I could see a scenario where I would say to myself, you know, I'm kind of friends with this vampire. Maybe if I just became his familiar, he would turn me into a vampire.
Yeah.
It never works.
No.
It never works. And I just need to remember that, because maybe the temptation of eternal life, super strength, creepy fangs would just win me over. But they're never going to turn me. They're just going to make me like in What We Do in the Shadows, pick up their dry cleaning.
Yep. It's how I feel whenever I look at a casino. I'm like, okay, yeah, that might be fun. But then I realize, oh, the house always wins. Well, but I'm just going to walk away. The vampire always wins. The house always wins.
But maybe this time it could be different for me.
Yeah. But I don't think that applies to us. Yeah, this takes us to part 3, the deserted village, where our final check-in on Salem's Lot is that it is dead and nobody knows it. I love that. I love all these details about just like during the day, tourists will pass through and think, oh, this is like any other town. But man, at several points through the book, like King reuses the same cliche, like, oh, they rolled the sidewalks up. Like there are just no people out. But yeah, like, you know, the people who are not turned, the people who are able to go out during the day really don't. They just kind of stay indoors, even if they don't know exactly what's going on. They're like, let me get that cross out a little bit. Let me find that St. Christopher medal. Things like that. Like it is really bad news for Salem's Lot. And we get a lot of loose ends tied. Specifically, my favorite one is with the bus driver. Remember the scene? Like I forget the bus driver's name, but Reggie.
Oh, yeah. That was so mad at all those kids on the bus cutting up.
Yep, all those kids on the bus cutting up, and they were out there. Like made them get out and walk the rest of the way to school. And you can explain why you were late, Tibbets. I guess Tibbets had a son. He didn't really talk about it, but no, you can explain why you're late. And then just all of a sudden he goes out to start his shift, and he is just immediately just completely drained of all his blood by the vampire kids who want their revenge. Yeah, it's very good.
It's interesting that the vampires do, like, while being just they're so animalistic, but also they do retain a little bit of cunning.
Yeah.
And ties.
Yeah.
To their old lives.
And a good sense of irony.
Oh, yeah. They love a goof.
Yep. They want to make sure that whoever they kill, it's appropriate. Yeah.
As long as somebody learns a life lesson, it just makes the blood taste that much sweeter.
Yes, it does. Taste that? That's the realization.
So we've got our little quartet.
Yes, we do.
Oh, we just lost Susan, unfortunately.
Yes, we did. Our dwindling quartet. Mark goes to see Ben, saying like, "Hey, I'm a small child you don't know. Also, your girlfriend is dead." It's more sensitive than that. Like, "Hey, she's turned. We need to deal with this." The news wrecks Ben. Meanwhile, Matt dies of heart failure in the hospital, really just leaving the quartet as, Ben, Dr. Cody, Callahan, and Mark. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So like we're in the end game here as they lead this expedition into the Marston house to find Barlowe and Susan.
Mm-hmm.
But they only find Susan.
Oh, poor Susan.
Poor Susan. Like it sucks. Like there's nothing left of her when Ben goes to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And, it takes several tries. Like it's not a clean kill.
It was interesting the way that the language that they used to say that he had to make her his wife, that he had to be the one to do it because of their relationship. I thought that was all, like, everyone just seemed to have this innate knowledge, like it really is Ka in effect. Everyone's like, yep, this is the way it has to. I mean, it really is a greased rail situation.
Yeah. It just has to be this way. And even if you're not ready for it, maybe you can come out the other side of this ready for what you have to do next.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So Susan is down. Unfortunately, she's not able to. It's not a daywalker situation where she's able to help them out. Nope, just full on Lucy Westenra. Yeah, but they so Ben stakes her. The others perform rites on the body. They bury her. They throw her weighted coffin into a river. Her head is on backward in the coffin, stuffed with garlic, all the usual kind of stuff. That nasty business.
It would have been nice if some roses had been available for sale.
Yeah.
Would have made everybody feel better if they could have just made her a flower crown.
It's quite funny because they go out first, obviously, yes, the flower crown. I would take one of those right now in a heartbeat. Maybe not roses, that would be a little bit painful. But all of the roses are taken care of. They can still get garlic because try and get rid of all the garlic. It's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, though, that during the time I was reading this book, I definitely started cooking with a lot more garlic.
Hey, you never know.
You never know, but also it reminded me how good garlic is. Barlowe left a taunting note for Ben. But Mark and the others kind of say, like, hey, no matter how angry you are, like, Barlow's on the run. Like, yeah. Imagine how safe he feels. Imagine how comfortable he feels. We have, like Callahan has sealed his house off with a wafer. We have doused it with holy water. There is no way that he can come back. Right.
Yeah. It's a really, like, what a jerk letter it is.
Yeah. It's
a long letter just saying how much smarter I am than you,
Yeah. It's like, do you think that you're the first to come at me in my many centuries of life? I was old when Christianity was young, all this kind of stuff. Barlow's a little bit of a shit. Like, it makes sense how he survived this long, because of his just kind of immense power. But like, just the amount of people that he's pissed off and the degree to which he has pissed them off just kind of makes it seem like he wouldn't be that survivable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well. But Father Callahan and Mark decide brilliantly to split up. They go over to Mark's house to get his parents out of town, because in this note, Barlowe had specifically threatened Mark's parents, because Mark had, gotten away, had killed Strayer in his eyes, even though Barlowe was the one who held the rope. While they're arguing about how implausible all of this is, I love Mark's dad. Sorry, I took a left turn in that. How great is Mark's dad?
Oh, he is just like, well, this is not plausible. I'm a high-powered corporate accountant or whatever.
I'm an insurance adjuster, and I've run the tables on this in my head while we were talking. And
yeah. Realistically, he's the only person in the book that has reacted sensibly to what people are telling him so far. I mean,
yeah, it's like
it's just like, if Cole, like, I really like you. I have so much respect for you. I think you're brilliant. But if you were like Autumn at the end of the podcast, like, I think vampires might be real, I'd be like, okay, Cole, well, it's been a pleasure podcasting with you. Click. Like, cool. I mean, I wouldn't be like, well, maybe we should get some crosses, Cole.
Yeah, let's just round up a posse and go around and get some of them, get some of them Nightwalkers.
I'd pull my iPhone over and I'd text Jeremy and I'd be like, Cole is saying some crazy shit right now.
We need to cut some ties. I think that he's really at the end of his rope.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is very funny, because like he is very much thinking about like, oh, so like you've been going around like throwing bodies in rivers and staking them. You've involved my son in a crime. You know that we can't do this, right?
It is a little bit weird as a modern reader how often Mark Petrie is just rolling around with strange dudes and priests and stuff. I mean, it was a more innocent time, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, just free range kids, right?
Yeah, like, I mean, he just keeps getting dropped off at the house by a different grown-ass man.
Yeah.
that they've never seen before. Like,
yeah. Disrespected pillars of the community and outsiders and shady drifters.
Yeah,
Mark's got a good head on his shoulders. He's fine. So yeah, Callahan and Mark are there, and they're trying to say like, hey, maybe you should just go rent a Hampton Inn for a while. They just maybe let the heat die down. But then Barlowe simultaneously breaks all the windows in the house, rushes in through one of them, and kills Mark's parents by crushing their heads together with immense force. Yeah, pretty brutal. And on top of that, he decides to hold Mark captive. Mark
this is a good moment.
I love this. This whole scene is so good. Mark, being a badass, he decides to spit on Barlowe, and Barlowe is having none of it. He is so insulted. You spit on me.
When was the last time you think he got spit on? If he says 1,500 years old, like, when was the last time he got spit on?
I have no idea.
I bet it's been a while, like centuries.
Oh, absolutely. The people to have the gall to do that? Yeah. Somebody as imposing as Barlowe? As Kurt Barlowe?
It's just like when Vampire Lestat says, "You fed me dead blood." Like,
the nerve. Okay. Callahan steps forward, to confront Barlowe, and drive him off, to make Mark safe. And Barlowe says, "Hey, all I want is a fair fight. I'll give you Mark as long as you throw your cross to the side, right?
Mm-hmm.
No big deal. Let's just you and me, battle of wits, battle of faith." And Callahan says, "Yeah, okay, let's do that." But he holds onto the cross just a little bit too long.
Mm-hmm.
And as he holds onto it, he sees the power drain out of it. And that's ultimately the main flaw of Callahan in this book, is that he ultimately came to believe more fully in the trappings of the faith than the faith itself. It was the belief in the symbols that gave them power. And so Barlowe is able to come up and, snap the arms off of the cross while Callahan is stunned, and Barlowe forces Callahan to drink his blood.
Mm-hmm.
This is the best slaying in the book.
I think absolutely. Like, I mean, Callahan is just ruined.
Yeah. Like, he's not turned. He is not made in service. He is made unclean. Like, it is not just he is made to continue living with his own mind. Like with just as himself, but completely not to separate it from his profession and his ostensible calling. He's not able to go into the church. Like, his hand burns as he touches the handle to go inside. But like, nobody wants to be around him when he goes to buy the ticket. Like, the woman who sells it to him says, "You're going to need to wait outside." Like,
and his mouth tastes gross. So even his old favorite thing, which was drinking, can't help him now. I mean, his mouth tastes gross.
Yeah, it's not going to stop him from trying, though.
No, I mean, he's in this one aspect, he does have a lot of heart.
Yeah, no, he's definitely he's got a lot of try in him. As he buys a ticket to NYC and he pays $30 for a pint of cheap booze just to try and wash the taste of rot out of his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sucks. Like, no matter how many misgivings I have about Callahan as he was represented here, like, that has to be a face worse than death. Like, it is taking just regular run-of-the-mill excommunication and amplifying it times 1,000 and making it that he is just cast out of human society in general.
And it's almost worse that no one like sees his shame, and they all just think that he gave up his life honorably to Barlowe and was defeated, like the rest of the quartet. Yeah,
they're just like, oh well, Callahan, he just gone. Like, he must have been turned, like everybody else is. We've got more pressing things to worry about than the dad.
One thing that I thought was interesting, this was a little bit before Callahan, when they were arming themselves to go over there, and Ben ended up with that hammer. We also saw that in Desperation with Johnny, like, which is the other one that is a treatise on religion. I mean, they end up armed with these. Ben and Johnny both end up armed with these hammers that have almost a supernatural religious power to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't draw that connection, but that is very well observed.
I love a good hammering. I've always got my eyes out for hammers.
Yeah, it would be useful. Guess what? You come up on a door, you got to pry that. Well, it is very funny how a padlock very nearly thwarts their progress at the end of this. Let's get a hammer, pry that thing out, man.
It probably would have been a little bit easier if the padlock had thwarted their progress for Jimmy, at least.
Probably, yeah. But yeah, let's go through the end here, because it is we are within spitting distance of it. Mm-hmm. So Callahan's out of the picture. Now it's down to 3. It is just Mark. It is just just Ben and Cody. Mark has a vague recollection he has seen blue chalk on Barlowe's clothes, and they basically triangulate this, trying to figure out, okay, well, what would have blue chalk? Maybe it'd be the science class. No, it wouldn't be the science class. Maybe it's the elementary. So they're operating on this lead. Hey, maybe we should go to the elementary school. Mm-hmm. But then Ben remembers that, hey, there's a pool table in the boarding house basement. Barlow's down there now. Like, that's where he's hiding out, basically beneath where the leader of his hunting troop is shacking up, right?
Mm-hmm.
The initial stab to go there, man, that was a very unfortunate choice of words, is thwarted when Jimmy Cody dies to a booby trap set of stairs, basically right in front of Mark, in front of this 12-year-old boy.
Oh yeah, they're about to walk downstairs to the basement, and the vampires have sawed off the steps, so it looks like the steps are there. There's just 2 steps and then down into darkness, and they've also removed all of the knives in the house and wedged them up with plywood, so you'll just fall right into a whole mess of knives.
Yeah, and the crappy thing, well, it sucks that Cody's dead, but also it sucks that Mark blames himself because he noticed that all the knives were gone.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also stopping and thinking, how many knives are in this home? I know how many knives I have. It's a good number of knives because I don't like washing dishes, but
I even like cook a lot and have a lot of knives, but I mean, I think I have a survivable amount of knives depending on how you fell on them. I mean,
Okay, so if you decided, hey, Cole, he's got all these crazy ideas about vampires, he's got to go. Let's throw him onto all the knives that he owns. I might be able to walk away from that.
Yeah, like maybe you'd puncture a lung, but modern medicine could fix you.
Yes, yeah, modern non-1975 medicine. Yeah, no. So Cody, he's gone. And Mark blames himself for it. The initial draft of this was apparently so bad, so horrific, that the publisher made King change it. Originally, it was going to be Dud sicking the army of rats on Cody and having the swarm of rats eat him alive.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So who knows which of those would have been better, but I'm happy knowing both were possibilities.
Yeah. And it's nice that Jimmy wasn't turned.
True. He was saved that indignity. Yeah. So Ben and Mark are the only two left. They make their final confrontation with Barlowe as the sun is going down. They're nearly thwarted by the padlock, but they manage to get through.
And I love the scene where Ben's like basically yelling at Mark, like he's giving him the full Friday Night Lights, like clear eyes, full hearts, like just like we have to go down there, we have to suck it up. Like he just does the whole like sports speech.
Yeah, why are you yelling at me when you're just yelling at yourself, old man?
Yeah, exactly.
And I want to say this monologue just because it's here, it's badass, and it is a major part of this book. They uncover Barlow's body, and as he is rising from his torpor, he wants to dress Ben down. He says, "Look and see me, puny man. Look upon Barlowe, who has passed the centuries as you have passed hours before a fireplace with a book. Look and see the great creature of the night whom you would slay with your miserable little stick. Look upon me, scribbler. I have written in human lives, and blood has been my ink. Look at me and despair."
Whew.
So good.
Yeah.
And Ben's like, yeah, nah.
I was kind of surprised at how easy the staking went.
Yeah.
I was just a little surprised. Like Ben just jumps right up on that dude, just gets his stake on.
Yeah. Like at probably literally the last moment that he could have done this.
Yeah. It's a shame Mark didn't just get one more spitting in.
Yeah. Well, who knows what they did when they were disposing of the teeth. Yeah.
When they were loading up on holy water, I was like, guys, haven't you seen like this in like film and television? Drink the holy water immediately. It'll be circulating in your bloodstream.
Yeah. Well, it's very fortunate that they were able to that they anointed themselves, because that's the only way they were able to walk away. Like they bathed themselves in it. Very cool little like visual beat that like when they walked into this space around Barlowe and all of the boarders who had turned into vampires, and just that the holy water caused them to glow with kind of an eldritch fairy light. Good stuff. But yeah, Ben finishes the staking, and we get this awesome description of Barlowe kind of like rotting backward through time, first aging and then ultimately just kind of desiccating, and his skeleton going away until all that is left is his teeth. And they're able to walk away from the vampires who, for the first time are showing something besides instinct and mourning the loss of their leader. They're anointed in holy water. None of them can take revenge. They give proper burials to Jimmy and to Mark's parents, and they get rid of the teeth and they flee town. And
that's where we find him at the beginning, back in Los Zapatos in Mexico.
Back in the shoes. All God's chillins are in the shoes. As they decide, hey, it's time for us to go back, finish things off, so nobody can drive through and, get one for the roaded. As Mark and Ben go back there and decide, hey, a brush fire nearly took the town out before. Why don't we set a fire and see what happens? And it is not good enough. And you, dear listener, as you are driving, from wherever you live to wherever you're going, and you pass by one of those towns that seems a little hostile, a little shut away, maybe, not as active or a little bit dead, and it's definitely a common sight in the American countryside nowadays. Who knows what is hiding behind those picket fences? No, but that's Salem's Lot.
Ah. what a fun romp that was.
Yeah, it's like it is very good. I was kind of surprised because you always have that bit of trepidation, right, going into a book that is so built up as being, like a major work like this is. The modern day retelling of Dracula. There are all kinds of ways that could go wrong. I don't think every single note this hits is, the best. But that's a weird standard to hold it up to for an author's second book. Hedging. I had a very good time with this. Excellent imagery, excellent ideas, and just a really, really awesome portrait of a fucked up small town.
I'm a big Needful Things person. Like I love that book, and it's interesting that some of the beats are the same, but you don't even associate them with each other. Like
Right.
The characters and everything are so well drawn and realized that even though, I mean, my God, we literally are talking about an evil that comes to town to sell antiques. They literally set up an antique store,
Yeah.
but it feels completely different than Needful Things despite that.
Mm-hmm. Different kinds of evil.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's room for all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait to meet to see Father Callahan again in the next books.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to so my next read through and my next listen through, which I do for these when we get ready for the show. This will be the first time where I really know more about his backstory than is described in Wolves of the Calla. So I'm very much just really going to relish looking at those events through a new lens with more information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Autumn, for coming on and talking about this. Did you have any final thoughts about Salem's Lot?
Oh, no, just everybody, if you're listening along, it's definitely worth a read, even if this is one that you decide to skip past to get back to the tower meet. Yeah, definitely give this one a read. It's worth it. I'll probably wait another year or so, and then I'll probably read it again.
Yeah. There's a lot of detail that we skipped over. A lot of incidental characters off to the side. Small little details about kind of the family lives of individual characters that just wouldn't bear talking about in detail on the show. I would definitely say, even if you did listen to this for a summary to understand where Callahan came from, Salem's Lot is definitely worth a read. It goes by very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Autumn, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at Mrs. Greer. That's at MISSUS Greer. You can also find me on the Duckfeed Slack and the Radio Free Midworld channel.
Yeah. And they'll also find you next episode talking about the Regulators.
That is absolutely correct.
Yeah. The alternate universe version of Desperation. I'm excited because I understand that book is just buck wild.
Bizarro Desperation.
Yeah. So, and Desperation was already pretty bizarro. Where you can find me on other Duckfeed.tv shows, at Cole Ross on Twitter, and twitch.tv/Duckfeed.tv if you want to watch me play horror themed video games. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time. Until then, though, long days and pleasant nights. Welcome to Radio Free Midworld, a podcast about the Dark Tower series of books by Stephen King and, related works. We're here today to talk about nope, not Jerusalem's Lot, about Salem's Lot. I'm going to retake that.
God, I was hoping you were about to say Jurassic Park, and I was like, hell yeah.
Curveball.